we go. You can prepare, but still it will come to you by surprise, crossing through your doorway, calling your name in greeting, turning like a child who quickens suddenly within you. How wide your heart will open in welcome for the joy that finds you so ready and yet, my friends, still so unprepared. As we prepare to light this candle of joy on this fourth Sunday of Advent, let us commit ourselves to co-creating and cultivating a more joy-filled, joyous, and joyful world, in step with the one that was foretold by the ancient prophets and the kind of joyous world we know we can be. Let us commit to a kinder, softer, and gentler world in which all may flourish and experience the fullness of life and their living. And let us commit to a world that is grounded in love, peace, justice, faith, hope, love, and everlasting and abiding joy. May it be so. May it be so. Well, good morning. Good morning and welcome to Fountain Street Church on this Joy Sunday, the fourth, if you can believe it, the fourth Sunday of Advent already. My name is Reverend Christopher Rowe. I have the honor and the pleasure and the responsibility, a big responsibility, of serving as the acting senior minister here in this cathedral of love, in this temple for peace and faith and hope and love and joy that we call Fountain Street Church. And on behalf of everybody who has gathered here or is joining us from home or will watch months from now, but still call this place their spiritual home, let me welcome you to this joyful and joyous and wonderful hour of worship we're going to share this morning. In a joyful hour it will be. We have many, many wonderful gifts that have been presented to us this morning. We welcome Cantor David Fair from Temple Emmanuel and his beautiful voice. We welcome Margie Peterson accompanying, as well as Joe DeWinkle is back with us again. The choir and Austin will be singing, and we have Jonathan Tuuk on organ. We have the handbell choir with us. We have readers from a generation below many of us, and it will be wonderful to see them again. It shall be a beautiful and joyous morning. And I am so glad you are with us this morning. I am honored to also welcome some other special voices that you'll be hearing about later. But in the meantime, I think it's time that we turn to one another and greet one another in the spirit of joy and in peace. The peace of love is with all of you. Please turn to one another and greet each other with this peace.
In those days, Mary set out and went with haste to a Judean town in the hill country, where she entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the child leaped in her womb. And Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit and exclaimed with a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And why has this happened to me, that the mother of my Lord comes to me? For as soon as I heard the sound of your greeting, the child in my womb leaped for joy. And blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her by the Lord." And Mary said,
"My soul magnifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on the lowliness of his servant. Surely from now on all generations will call me blessed, for the Mighty One has done great things for me, and holy is his name. His mercy is for those who fear him from generation to generation. He has shown strength with his arm. He has scattered the proud in the thoughts of their hearts. He has brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things and sent the rich away empty. He has filled his servant Israel in remembrance of his mercy, according to the promise he made to our ancestors, to Abraham and to his descendants forever." And Mary remained with her for about 3 months and then returned to her home.
Ave Maria, gratia plena, Maria, gratia plena, Maria, gratia plena. Ave, Ave Dominus, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus, et benedictus frutris ventris, ventris tui, Iesus. Ave Maria, Ave Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, ora pro nobis, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis, in hora mortis nostrae, in hora mortis nostrae, in hora nostrae. Ave Maria.
My soul is alive with thoughts of God. What a wonder, their liberating works. Though the world has been harsh to me, God has shown me kindness, seen my worth, and called me to courage. Surely those who come after me will call me blessed. Even when my heart weighs heavy with grief, still so does hope abide with me. Holy is the one who makes it so. From generation to generation, love's mercy is freely handed out. None are beyond the borders of God's transforming compassion. The power of God is revealed among those who labor for justice. They humble the arrogant. They turn unjust thrones into dust. Their wisdom is revealed in the lives and truths of those of the margins. God is a feast for the hungry. God is the great redistributor of wealth and resources. God is the ceasing of excessive and destructive production, that all the earth might rest. Through exiles and enslavement, famine and wars, white supremacy and climate crisis, God is a companion in loss, a deliverer from evil, a lover whose touch restores. This is the promise they made to my ancestors, to me, to all the creatures and the creations. Now and yet coming, and in this promise, I find my strength. Come, great healer, and be birthed through us.
Holy night, the stars are brightly shining. It is the night of our dear Savior's birth. Long lay the world in sin and error pining, till he appeared and the soul felt its worth. A thrill of hope, the weary world rejoices, for yonder breaks a new and glorious morn. Fall on your knees, oh, hear the angel voices, oh, night divine, oh, night when Christ was born, oh, night divine, oh, night divine. Led by the light of faith serenely beaming, with glowing hearts by his cradle we stand. So led by light, a star sweetly gleaming, here came the wise men from the Orient land. The King of Kings lay thus in lowly manger, in all our trials born to be our friend. He knows our need. He guardeth us from danger. Behold your King before the lowly band. Oh, night divine,
Thank you, David. Oh my goodness, what a treasure, what a gift. I don't think I need to preach now, right? I also was sitting there thinking, will they believe me if I tell them I'm allergic to the poinsettias? That's what's going on here. It's very stirring, thank you. Okay, Dr. Martin Seligman is considered to be one of the architects of positive psychology, or at least contemporary positive psychology as we know it, which is a specific realm or family or branch of psychology that espouses that we can move individuals like ourselves or systems like our churches or communities or even entire societies from a place of survival to a place of flourishing when we focus on nurturing and nourishing character strengths of those individuals that allow them to build a life of meaning and purpose. It's a field of psychology that suggests we can move from simply just surviving in our daily lives to thriving as an ecosystem of the human family when we focus on the very personal strengths that bring each of us and all of us a life of deeper meaning and higher purpose. So unsurprisingly, practitioners and theorists and researchers of this family of psychology pay a great deal of attention to identifying the patterns, the practices, and of course, the pathways that lead to a fulfilling and joyful life, including Dr. Seligman. In his work to delineate the sharp contrast between mere happiness that's really just a transient feeling and instead looking at profound and life-shifting joy as a pathway, he suggests there are actually three interconnected and interrelated pathways that lead to a more joy-filled, joyful, and joyous life. And so he organizes them into three lifestyles, the first of which he calls the pleasant life. Now, this is a pathway towards a joyous life that we can all do pretty easily and even identify a few steps to get there because it's quite simple. The pleasant life is about consciously seeking out the activities that bring us pleasure and then doing them. That's it. Seligman suggests that in this first pathway towards a more joyful life, we quite literally discern what it is that brings us pleasure and then cultivate a life in which we make time and space and energy and capacity to do those very activities. Pleasure is obviously a very personal experience and an individual endeavor. We choose for ourselves what brings us pleasure. It could be as simple as a swim in your lake or making music with your friends or reading your favorite book or cooking or sewing or gardening. It could be anything. Pleasure can be inspired by any number of activities, but it needs to be prioritized, and that's perhaps the most challenging part about this pathway towards joy. I would assume that all of us do a good job at knowing what brings us pleasure, but not so great of a job at prioritizing the very things that bring us to that state of joy. But as a vital pathway towards a joyous and authentic way of flourishing, Seligman suggests that we must discern exactly what it is that brings us pleasure, what gets in the way of us experiencing pleasure, and what must change in our daily lives so that we can cultivate this pleasant life fully and authentically. So if the first pathway towards joyous living and flourishing as a community is this pleasant life pathway, Seligman suggests that the second is the good life. The good life. In this life, or in this pathway towards a virtuous and joy way of being, we imagine and we identify what our own signature strengths are, and then we engage them in such a way that we delightfully experience gratification. Signature strengths are simply those things that we might also identify as our virtues, our qualities, our talents, our gifts, and the activities that we are both good at and passionate about. And Seligman suggests that we identify these strengths one at a time and then build them into a foundational part of our pathway towards the good life. If the pleasant life is about identifying that which brings us pleasure and then inviting that into the rhythm of our life, the good life is about imagining that which brings us purpose and inviting that into the rhythm of our behavior. You've probably heard that trite phrase, do what you love and love what you do. Well, this is essentially the motto for the good life. The good life is quite literally doing what you love and loving what you do by identifying your own unique, individual, signature strengths. and then engaging them in all areas of your life. This is a different manifestation of joy. But it's important that we also are aware of our signature weaknesses. Often we get caught up in trying to hone in on what we're not good at, or what maybe our weaknesses might be, or our growing edges if we're trying to keep it positive. But Seligman actually suggests that that is not healthy or helpful in cultivating a joyous life, because we have many things worth putting that capacity and time and energy towards. Because the good life is about engaging our strengths in such a way that we ultimately feel joy in the form of gratification. And we can't do that when we're just looking at our weaknesses. So in addition to the pleasant life, and of course the good life, he suggests that the third and final pathway towards the authentic life of flourishing and joy is the meaningful life. The meaningful life is also quite simple to understand, but a little harder to do. The meaningful life is about service to others, or service to a purpose and a power bigger than ourselves. This is a pathway towards joy that expands on the pleasant life and on the good life in such a way that that which brings us pleasure and that which what we are good at and they are our strengths actually come into alignment together. They come into alignment. And they come together in such a way that we can use that energy and that power in service to causes and issues and powers greater than ourselves as individuals. The meaningful life is quite literally a way of being in which our pleasures and our strengths and our outer world come together, and we are able to put our lives to work in service to our broader world. Interestingly, Seligman's theories come from the fertile soil of humanism and many of the principles of humanism, but he actually suggests that the meaningful life has the most compelling case for a religious, moral, and ethical one informed by a spiritual life. Which reminds me, if you've ever read the Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, there's a quote in it that I'd like to lift up this morning from the Dalai Lama, in which he had been asked what it means to live with joy. And this is what he says. I think if you are an intensely religious believer, as soon as you wake up, you thank God for another day. And then you try to do God's will. For a non-theist like myself, but who is a Buddhist, as soon as I wake up, I remember Buddha's teaching, the importance of kindness and compassion, wishing something good for others, or at least reducing their suffering. So then I set my intention for the day. That is, the day should be meaningful. Meaningful means, if possible, serving and helping others beyond myself. And if that's not possible, then at least to not harm others. That's a meaningful day. I think that a meaningful day inspired by a meaningful life is about knowing who you are. It's about knowing what brings you pleasure. It's about knowing what it is that engages your greatest strengths. And it's about knowing what it is that you can bring to our world in pursuit of serving something bigger than just yourselves, specifically by what you have to offer the world. And let me pause there for a moment and remind you that each and every one of you, all of you, and this community, regardless of your age of being or your stage of life, lived experience, or your current conditions, each of you has something that the world is waiting on. So we have the pleasant life, a life of pleasure. The good life, a life of potential with our strengths, and the meaningful life, a life of purpose beyond ourselves. Pathways of pleasure, potential, and purpose, and each of them a vital part of flourishing and wellness in our world. But it's the spaces at which they come together and the places in which they intersect that he refers to as the full life, or the joyful life, the joyful life. In his book, Authentic Happiness, he suggests that a joyful life consists of experiencing positive emotions about our past and our future, which should sound familiar to us, savoring positive feelings from the pleasures, deriving abundant gratification from our signature strengths, and using these strengths in service to something larger to obtain meaning and fulfillment. The joyful life. I don't pretend this morning to know what brought Mary or Elizabeth pleasure in these ancient stories that we heard. I don't assume to understand what their signature strengths were either, much less Zechariah's or Joseph's or the shepherds that were keeping watch in their fields by night or the wise ones who were studying the night sky. But I would be willing to bet that the reason that joy is so pervasive in the ancient stories that we retell year after year here is because they are the story of a people coming to terms with a joyful life as they come to understand the ways in which they themselves are being used in service to a power that is higher than themselves. I would like to imagine for a moment that Mary saw herself and knew from the depths of her being that everything she had ever longed for, everything she had ever known about herself, and everything that she had ever enjoyed or hoped and dreamed and found pleasure in was coming together in the powerful and earthly manifestation of the Magnificat we heard earlier. A magnificent Magnificat of joy that could only be known by those who found themselves at the intersection of pleasant, good, and meaningful pathways of life. I have to believe that biblical joy that we see in the Christmas stories is the very joy that's referenced nearly 400 times throughout the Christian canon. And it's a joy that's rooted in pleasure, potential, and purpose. And that invitation still exists for each and every one of us and all of us as a church, even this year, calling us to experience joy in largely the same ways. And so to that end, on this final Sunday of Advent, on this Sunday before our Christmas Eve celebrations, and on this final Sunday that we will be together in a long, long 2022 year, I have to ask, how's your joy doing? How's your joy doing, my friends? Where do you find yourselves this morning on this pathway with three interdependent and interconnected lifestyles before us? How well are you living the pleasant life? How well are you living the good life? How well are you living the meaningful life this morning? How are you doing in the pursuit to experience more of what brings each of you pleasure? How are you doing in the endeavor to experience more of what engages your signature gifts and strengths within your inner world? And how are you experiencing these pleasures in that inner world being teased out and used for a higher purpose larger than yourself in your outer world? How are you experiencing the joyful life? And I guess while we're on the topic, we should ask the same for our church, huh? Where is this church on those three paths? How well is this 153-year ministry that we are entrusted with embodying the pleasant life, the good life, and the meaningful life? How are we doing at what brings pleasure to this church? And how are we enjoying it freely and fully with one another? How are we doing at bringing our pleasures and our potentials together in such a way that we know what our strengths are and sharing them freely and fully beyond these hallowed and sacred walls? How is this church and the people that call it home living joyfully together? How are we experiencing the joyful life? On this final Sunday, we'll be together in 2022 in this final hour of worship before many of us depart for weeks of holiday travel and busy schedules and consuming distractions. I want to take this moment to suggest, and this is just me talking, that this has been a profound year of joy and joyful living for me and this church. Even with its struggles, its unknowns, and its uncertainties and discomforts, I believe that 2022 will be a year of remarkable growth and transformation for this congregation because, in many ways, time and time again, this church chose willingly and willfully to embody the joy-filled life. We began this calendar year in a very different place than we will end it. And through that metamorphosis, I have seen profound ways in which this congregation and this community of faith has lived into its pleasures, engaged its signature strengths, and pursued infinite ways to exist in service to powers and purposes beyond the walls and beyond our dreams for this community. At many points throughout this past year and over these troubled times that we have shared, we have articulated as a congregation what it is that brings pleasure to this community, and we have sought it out, and we have celebrated and relished in it and delighted in it freely and fully. Over and against the noise of this world and the dysfunctions that exist in our society, we have continued as a congregation to name some of our greatest strengths and sometimes even our weaknesses, and began to engage those very strengths with humility, courage, openness, and determination. And even as the wars of racial injustice, systemic oppression, bodily inequality, and political and religious violence have waged beyond these sacred walls and dizzied our individual senses and collective spirits, this congregation, this church that is you, in its 153-year ministry still challenged its own issues, engaged its own fears in pursuit of service to something higher and greater and far bigger than any of us know in this shared ministry within these walls. And so, yes, I do believe that this community that we share is at the very least moving in the right direction towards a joyful, joy-filled, and joyous life together. But as we journey into the heart of Christmas and this week of New Year's together, I want you to know I'm praying. I will continue to pray because it will be my unwavering, unceasing, and undying prayer that each and every one of you, and this church, each and every one of you will know what it means to live a joyful, joy-filled, and joyous life. I am praying that you will know the pleasures that bring you joy and that you will regularly and routinely invite them into your lives. I'm praying that you will know the gifts and the talents and the treasures and the strength that already exist within you, and that you will regularly embody them and engage them. And I'm praying that you will know the courage and the strength and the grit and the determination necessary to unleash your pleasure and your potential in such a way that you begin to offer service and power to something much bigger than yourselves and bigger than your holiest imagination. Because like an elderly woman who never dreamed she would be with child, or her young cousin who could never have imagined she would be part of the revolution that was to come, you too have been given so much power and entrusted with so much purpose to be part of turning the world toward a more loving, just, peaceful, and joy-filled direction. But it's never going to happen until you see this gift within yourself, for yourself. So may this church, may Fountain Street Church ever be the place that helps you know and see and affirm this joyful spark that already exists within you. And may this Christmas and this New Year's offer us the courage and the inspiration to journey down these three paths of joy together. I am so grateful for the joy that each of you brings this world, this church, and my life. Blessed be. Merry Christmas. Thank you, choir, and thank you, Austin and Joe. Friends, we have come to the embodied part of our service where we offer a bit more of ourselves in service to something higher and greater than our own purpose. In Advent, we have the tradition of designating the designated portion of the plate instead from the social action grants to a direct organization that we wish to support in this season. And so this week, we will be designating this portion of the proceeds to the Grand Rapids African American Health Institute. They are actually in the midst of celebrating their 20th anniversary this year, and they were born out of a need to dismantle the health disparity that was due to studies that showed that black citizens in our city did not receive the same equitable treatment as other races, particularly the white community. And so it was born as both a research organization as well as a healthcare, education, and connection organization. And so they're in the midst of continuing this legacy by trying to grow some of their funds that allow for research, anything from scholarships for people who are doing research to helping get advocacy out there for vaccination clinics and everything else to bring wellness to our black community here right in Grand Rapids. And so please give freely and generously and joyously. In that spirit, the offering will now be most graciously received. Amen. You may be seated. I am a humanist among the best of them, but sometimes with those hymns and carols, I struggle with the new words. I was like, I don't know these words. Sorry. I realized that was like a stranger to me when I actually read it. All right, friends, we have lots of announcements, lots of wonderful announcements, lots of joyous announcements to invite you into a joyful way of being as a community. The first of which is, I'll jump ahead just a little bit, this Wednesday at 7:30 right here in this beautiful space, we will be having our longest night service, 7:30. That's a way to hold the tension of this season, hold loss, hold mourning. We're going to give special attention this year to the losses that happened during the COVID-19 pandemic for different reasons at different degrees. Many of us didn't have normal ways of saying goodbye to people we lost or ritualizing that loss, and so we will be holding the complexity of that as well as the complexity of relationships lost during the pandemic or other losses that bring this to be a hard time of year for you, and maybe it's not related to the pandemic at all. So everyone is encouraged to come that would find meaning in this darkest and longest night of the year, 7:30 on Wednesday. Speaking of loss and remembrance, we have new tiles in the memorial tower, and so we always walk through there on our way to the social hall. I'll have an invitation for that in a moment, but I would encourage you to spend just a moment remembering our friends Wendy Kapolka and John Barfus. Their tiles are up. We lost John a couple years ago and Wendy this year, so it's just an opportunity to rest for a moment, feel their presence within and among us, and delight that we knew them and had the chance to love them. Okay, after the service, it's a big celebration of joy and wonder and community and merry making in the social hall. Please go next door. For those of you who'd like to, stop to the Tower Memorial Room and make your way to the social hall. We have our Savory and Sweet Sunday full of treats for everybody. All are welcome. Please come spend some time and revel in the joy with one another. And then, of course, a week from yesterday, so next Saturday, we have two services right here in this beautiful space we share, 5 o'clock Lessons and Carols service. We'll have Jonathan Tuuk on organ, and we will have a couple readers bringing some beautiful poetry and the sacred texts from the ancient stories we lift up every year from the Bible. And we will just have a lovely time, 30 to 40 minutes, so it's accessible to either those who need to get home and finish their dinner or to families and young at heart who would like 30 or 40 minutes to be their max. And then at 9 o'clock, we will gather in here for that sacred candlelight service, lessons and carols, a brass quintet, organ, our wonderful choir, readings and reflections. So I hope that if you're able, you can join us. Of course, the 9 o'clock will be streamed and also archived for a later date. And finally, on New Year's Day, I will be holding a service in the social hall, a brunch-style service. So please know that everybody is included and welcomed and belong in that service. We will gather at tables, and we will share in both corporate and personal liturgy at the tables, and we will just ring in the new year together. So please look for more information about that. And actually, for real, finally, I forgot I have one more announcement, and that is about the Grand Rapids Community Choir invitation. Many of you have done this before. It's for the Martin Luther King Jr. Day service, not the Monday celebration, but the service that always happens the day before on Sunday. This is a wonderful opportunity that I know Fountain Streeters have participated in. The reason I'm bringing it up now is the first rehearsals on January 4th, which in this time of the year is about 1 second. So I want to invite you to give that some thought. It was in the Friday Flash. It's also in the paper Friday Flash out there. Ruth Stein has more information about this. So shoot her an email or give her a call if you have any questions. I really hope as many of us as we can muster up will participate in this really important and meaningful connection that we have. So please hold that in your hearts and in your discernment. Okay, now we say thank you, because what a beautiful service. Oh my gracious. So will you help me in thanking David Fair, Cantor Fair? Thank you so much. Thank you. What a beautiful gift. Oh, how about the handbell choir members, which are mostly right here? Thank you. Again, I sat there and thought they could have done the sermon on joy. We could just, make that 15 minutes. It was joyful and joyous. Thank you. Jonathan Tuuk, we are so grateful for your gifts among us. Thank you, Jonathan. I also want to make sure we don't forget Joe and Margie, who were both our accompanists today in different capacities. Thank you both. Thank you. And goodness gracious, Austin, our choir director. And of course, the largest body of ministers among us, our choir. Thank you, choir. One of them gave themselves a fist pump. So friends, before we depart from this time together, I recognize that some of you will begin to go off in your own directions. Some of you have your own plans. You won't make it on Saturday night, and we just often go our own ways until January. So this blessing is for Christmas. It's for the new year. It's for our community. I bless you and pray for you a joyous and joy-filled life. May you know the things that bring you pleasure. May you know and affirm the spark of potential that's already within you and your strengths and gifts. And may you know the alignment and the power that comes with the magical moment in which all three of those come together in a life of joy. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.